So we're about to dive into an idea that is so powerful it's been shaping governments and whole societies for, get this, over 2,000 years. It's Plato's theory of justice. And it all really boils down to one simple yet incredibly difficult question. What is justice? I mean, think about it. We hear that word all the time. In courtrooms, in political debates, on the news, we all feel like we're fighting for it. But do we even agree on what it actually means? Well, this is the exact question that has obsessed philosophers for centuries. But for Plato, writing way back in the 4th century BC, this wasn't just some philosophical puzzle to kick around. He looked at the world around him, and he genuinely believed that finding a real answer to this question, well, it was a matter of survival for his entire society. To really get Plato's answer, we have to understand his world. And his world, the ancient city of Athens, was smack in the middle of a profound crisis. Plato saw a society that was just being consumed by chaos. His era was defined by, and I'm quoting here, political turbulence and social crisis. Class conflicts were exploding everywhere, and he felt like the social fabric was completely unraveling. He believed the very soul of Athens was sick. And Plato was incredibly specific about what he thought was wrong. He saw politicians driven by pure selfishness, not the public good. He saw the government basically being used as a weapon by one class against another. And maybe worst of all, he saw what he called supreme ignorance parading as knowledge. People who claimed to have all the answers but didn't even understand the basic questions. So you're Plato, you're faced with this decaying society. He didn't just accept the common wisdom of his day. No, he decided he had to tear it all down to find the truth. He started by challenging the very definitions of justice that everybody else just took for granted. And for Plato, this was deeply personal. You can see here that he met his mentor, the famous Socrates, when he was just 20. But then in 399 BC, that same mentor was tried and executed by the Athenian state. That single event, right there, cemented Plato's belief that democracy, at least as they practiced it, was fundamentally broken. The system wasn't just flawed, it was lethal. So, what kind of ideas was he fighting against? Well, first up was the traditional theory. It sounds pretty simple and respectable, right? Justice is just telling the truth and paying your debts. Sounds good. But Plato immediately pokes a hole in it with a simple thought experiment. Imagine you borrow weapons from a friend. Later, that friend goes completely mad and demands his weapons back, and he's clearly planning to do some harm. Is it just to return them? Of course not. So that definition, while it sounds nice, it just doesn't work in every situation. It's not universal. Okay, next, Plato takes on a much more cynical and honestly a much more challenging argument. It comes from a guy named Thrasymachus who says, justice is simply the will of the powerful. Might is right. The people in charge make the rules to benefit themselves, and then they call that justice. Plato's counter-argument here is just brilliant. He argues that government is an art, kind of like medicine. Think about it. A doctor practices medicine to heal the patient, right? To help their subject, not to make themselves rich. Well, Plato says in the exact same way, the true art of ruling must be aimed at the well-being of the people, not the ruler. So after dismantling these existing definitions, Plato makes his truly revolutionary move. He argues that pretty much everyone has been looking for justice in the wrong place. Instead of looking at laws or governments or contracts, he tells us to look inward. And this, right here, is the absolute core of his whole theory. Justice isn't some set of rules or a social contract you sign. No, it's a state of the human soul. It is an internal order, a kind of psychic harmony where every part of you is working exactly as it should. And this leads him to his grand analogy. Plato says the individual soul has 3 parts. You can see them on the left. At the top, you've got reason, your intellect, then there's spirit, which is your courage, your ambition, and at the bottom, you have appetite, all your basic desires. A just person is someone whose soul is in perfect harmony, with reason guiding the other 2 parts. And Plato argued that a just state must perfectly mirror this exact structure. So how in the world do you organize an entire society based on the structure of the human soul? Well, this leads us right to Plato's blueprint for his ideal and perfectly just state. For Plato, it all comes down to 2 unshakable principles. First, functional specialization. Each person and each class has to do the specific job that they are naturally best at. And second, the principle of non-interference. The classes must not meddle with one another's duties. So a producer doesn't try to rule, and a soldier doesn't try to produce. Basically, stay in your lane. And that's really the essence of it all. For Plato, justice is simply when every part of the soul, and by extension the state, does its own business. It's the harmony that comes from every single piece of the whole machine performing its proper function. One person, one job. Now, this vision of a perfectly ordered society, built on specialization and harmony, it has been incredibly influential. But, and this is a big but, it also comes with a very dark side that has been fiercely debated for centuries. On the one hand, Plato is hailed as a father of political idealism. He dreamed up a state that fights selfishness and works like a single, unified body. But the criticisms, wow, they are devastating. His ideal state is seen as anti-democratic, elitist, giving absolute power to this tiny group of so-called philosopher kings. And by forcing everyone to stick to a single role for their whole life, you could argue it just crushes individual potential and creativity. And so this leaves us with a huge question, one that's just as relevant today as it was back then. Plato's vision promises a world of perfect harmony and efficiency, no social strife, no chaos. But what's the price of that perfection? How much individual freedom, choice, and ambition would we have to sacrifice to get that kind of collective order? That's the trade-off we're all still debating, thousands of years later.